And now, J.E. McNeil of Friends Meeting of Washington.
I always entitled it Patter and a Song. But I thought for change, after all these years of talking to you about politics, I'm sure you're bored about politics now. And I thought instead I'd tell you a story about a time in my life when I was doing somewhat different work. I was working at the Center on Conscience and War, and I was traveling among friends, but not just among friends. I was traveling among Muslims and Jews and Catholics and Mormons, and my very favorite group, the only group that I would go to their meeting before I would go to a Quaker meeting, and that's the Baptist. The Baptist Peace Fellowship. Have any of you ever heard of an organization called FOR, Friends of Reconciliation? All right, so Fellowship, what did I say? I've been around Friends too long. Fellowship of Reconciliation. So Fellowship of Reconciliation, what it does is it goes into churches that are not the historic peace churches, a phrase I don't like. I usually call them the usual suspects. And they help the people in those churches who believe strongly in justice and peace and equality to band together. Because there might be one at this church over here and one at that church over there. And it's hard, you know, like when there's small meetings out in the middle of nowhere and there's only 2 people who come to meeting regularly. It's hard, isn't it? Because you need that community. And so that's what the Fellowship of Reconciliation does. And there is a Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. It's one of my favorite groups. And there is an Episcopal Peace Fellowship. There is no Quaker Peace Fellowship. There's no Mennonite Peace Fellowship. And there's no Seventh-day Adventist Peace Fellowship, because we aren't the only historic peace churches. There are several others. But the Baptist Peace Fellowship are absolutely my favorite group. The problem is they have a little trouble understanding me. I go to their meetings, and part of what they do is that they will have communion. And I'll say, oh, well, I only do inward communion, I don't do outward communion. And they'll say, oh, okay. But you do believe in the sacraments, right? I said, yes, I do believe in the sacraments, internal sacraments, not external sacraments. Oh, but you did baptize your child, right? I believe that he was baptized in the Spirit. You can see where this conversation is going, which is pretty much nowhere. I've had it several times now. But I tell you, it was so much fun traveling with them. One of the first times I was there, we had a little meeting and we were talking about issues, and people were supposed to talk about things that made them uncomfortable. And you know what I said? I said, I hate eating lunch at meetings. I hate it because you walk in with your tray and you're looking around and you think, well, I'm going to sit over here, and they go, oh, I'm sorry, we're having a meeting. Or you go over there and they go, oh, I'm sorry, we haven't seen each other in a long time. Can you know, and then you kind of do find someplace to sit down, and you don't know anybody, and you got to sit there and start going, well, I'm with the Center on Conscience and War. What's that? And you explain, well, it's an organization that helps people who oppose war. Oh, okay. And then we start going into the I'm a Quaker, and we go back to, but you do believe in the sacrament. What was really nice about that conversation in the group was that when we rose up from that group and we went towards the cafeteria, one of the guys in the group took my arm and said, come sit with me. I loved that. It was so sweet. But then there were other times. For example, we were out on the hillside and they were going to do communion. And that's fine. I mean, we were singing songs and having a good time. They often got confused because I knew all the words. But, you know, I had explained to them that I hadn't always been a Quaker, and I did, in fact, know all the words. And it was fun. And then they came up with the plate and said, beer. Oh. And I went, no, that's okay. And they came up with the grape juice. They were Baptists, not Episcopalians. And they said, beer. And I said, no, thank you. And they went, well, are you sure? Yes. But you do believe in the sacraments, don't you? So, one of my favorite times meeting with the Baptists was in Utah. We were in a dry state, in a dry county, on a dry campus, which, you know, made me feel right at home, having been raised up in Texas. So there we were, and they said, oh, you've come to several of our meetings. Now we're going to have a birthday party tonight. Will you come to our birthday party? It's over in this dorm. So I go over to the dorm, and the door is propped open, and there's this guy who's not with our group, standing there with his arms crossed, and he goes, oh, let me open the door for you. And so I walk down the hall, and I find the dorm room, and they've got a whiskey bottle holding the door open, right? I go, well, that's an interesting choice. And I go in, and everybody's got a beer, and I get a beer, and we're all sitting there having a nice time, and all of a sudden, that young man that was standing by the front door comes in with a cop. I got busted with Mormons. By Mormons with Baptists. So they come in, and the guy says, the police officer says, you can't have this alcohol here. They said, it's a private party. He said, I don't care, you're on a public school campus, there is no alcohol allowed, you must get rid of it. He said, all right, we'll take it and we'll put it in the boot of our car. He said, no, it's still on campus. All right, we'll drive it off the campus and park on the street. No, unless you drive it out of the state. We were in Ogden, it was not going to happen. So he said, you have to pour it all down. One guy was smart enough when he saw the police officer at the door to run into the bathroom and finish his beer. I was jealous. It was pretty good beer. And yet we sat there and we had to, I said to the police officer, if you want to pour it down, there's the sink, go right ahead, we're not doing it. And so the police officer and the young boy started pouring beer and the whiskey down in the sink. That was a lot because the party just started. It was tragic. A waste, I tell you. And the young man said, I'll never forget his words. He said, I try not to drink. And I said to him, hon, if you have to cry, you've got a problem. Either drink or don't. But that wasn't, even though it was one of the most amusing, and I do love telling the story of being busted by a Mormon cop in Utah with Baptists. I think that's great. But the occurrence that was most important to me was another time. It was in Atlanta, Georgia. This is when the Baptists learned my singing chops. Because we were in Martin Luther King's Baptist Church. Now, y'all know me, I usually have two stories that intertwine, and it's going to be a little lumpy tonight, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I wanted to start out with another story of when I was a young girl. And I do mean young. I was the youngest of 5 kids, okay? I was the youngest of 5 kids, and the only race I could ever win was the endurance race, because I was so stubborn. Now this is the truth. Standing in that church, we had an African-American minister, we had a transsexual minister, and we had a white guy from the Civil Rights Movement standing there in bare feet. And I will never forget how I felt standing there singing this song, which I'm asking some friends to come up with me to sing with me, and y'all can undoubtedly join in, although I was surprised how many people did not know this song. Alrighty. Ready? We shall not be moved. Stand up and sing. We shall not be
together, we shall not be moved, just like a tree standing by the water. We shall not be moved. Gay and straight together, we shall not be moved. Gay and straight together, we shall not be moved, just like a tree standing by the water. We shall not be moved. Old and young together, we shall not be moved. Old and young together, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved.
So I lied to you. It came back to politics after all. Be persistent